pinching myself that I had the privilege and the chance to bring Dune to the screen. It was the biggest challenge of my life because it's very dangerous to tackle your childhood's dream. I'm pretty proud, and there's a lot of moments that are very close to the images I had in mind when I read the book as a kid. Yeah, it's very moving for me. Hans and I share the same passion for the book. We both read the book when we were young. We have the same kind of history. Hans was the first artist that joined me on part one, and he was the first artist that joined me on part two. It started, I would say that the part two started as 6 months after Dune released. Hans was still composing, was still scoring the movie. I was like sometimes receiving music and say, Hans, the movie's in theater right now and you're still sending me music. He said, yeah, but it's not, you understand, I want you to be inspired for part two. I cannot stop right now. Just listen and it will inspire you for when you're gonna write and blah, 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 blah. It is definitely the best way to experience Dune part two in IMAX. Why? Because IMAX is definitely the most immersive format you can find. And it has the ability to create very strong intimacy, but also tremendous scope. And I recommend strongly if you want to see the full power of Dune, you should see it in IMAX. I hope that they will be moved by the relationship of Paul and Shani. Part two, at its core, is a love story, a tragic love story. And I hope that people will embrace Paul and Shani's tragedy and be moved by what it means about our world today. We made so much effort to try to bring in all tiny details the subtlety of the desert and what it is to be walking in a desert. What the desert, that's the impact on the psyche, on your soul, of what it means to be in the desert, and even more what it is to ride a sandworm, and the exhilarating experience and the danger of such a means of transport. I mean, it's like something that you can only experience on the big screen in a theater. And I strongly believe that as humans, we need more than ever communal experience. We are meant to be together, and I think that cinema represents a beautiful moment to share stories together, and that's the most powerful way to enjoy cinema.
I never left the world of Dune. In fact, I think Denis thought I was quite mad because I kept writing after we finished the movie, but because I knew the story, I knew the book, I knew what was coming our way, and in fact, one of the main themes in this movie was written at the end of the first movie. I was standing up at Warner Brothers, and Denis came up to me, and we were just talking, and he very quietly said, "Have you ever read a book called Dune?" And I sort of, I became one of those little dogs that goes a little wild, right? I think I frightened Denis as an extraordinary human being, first and foremost, and secondly, an extraordinary director. And then he managed to do some magic tricks. The internal monologue I was talking about that is so uncinematic. He managed to figure out how to go and give you that side of the story without doing voiceover and stuff like that. He is an amazing filmmaker. He's an amazing. So he made it into a film as opposed to a talking book. I never understood why a film set on some strange planet in the future should use your normal romantic middle European orchestra. Why am I suddenly hearing violins? This all seems to be wrong. So we started building instruments, and we started designing instruments. People love criticizing this town about its brutality and about its callousness. I don't think I've ever worked with anybody who is quite as as considered as a human being as Denis, you know. And I think everybody, you know, when this room is full, you know, when full of musicians and full of sound designers and full of, you know, everything that, you know, everything we're throwing at it, and, you know, and Denis in this room, I know that everybody in this room would do anything for him, you know, because in a funny way, I know he would do anything for us, you know. So it's, you asked me what was it like to come from the first movie to the second movie. Well, it was coming back to the family. At the end of the day, I think, I mean, look, I know, I've done this for 47 years, this movie thing, writing music for movies. And the thing that never has changed is I always write for the people that are going to go and come and see this movie. I always try to do them justice. You know, I try not to take, you know, be cheap about things. I remember Ridley Scott saying to me once, sentimentality is second-hand emotion. I always thought that was really good. So if you write, for instance, an emotional theme, make it an emotional theme, don't make it a sentimental theme, you know. Give it a bit of class. This collaborative process whereby, yes, I write the music. But that's only a fraction of what we're doing. You know, I see it much more as a directorial role. You know, if you think about what a director does, I mean, especially somebody like Denis, who writes as well, you know, sits in the cutting room, obviously knows how to edit, obviously knows his cameras, obviously knows his light, obviously knows how to persuade his actors. So many things, you know, are going on, and at a certain point when we're all in this room and we're talking about music, you know, my musicians, my technicians become my actors. I'd love to talk to you about Pedro because here's the thing, you know, we were talking about super duper computers and super duper science and synthesizers, and you look around this room and it's full of machines, etc. And then comes in Pedro, and he plays you something beautiful, and I'm going, what's this instrument? He goes, oh, I went to the plumbers. It's PVC piping that they actually use in toilets, and I've built this instrument out of it, and this happens all the time. He was very nervous showing this film because it was very unfinished. He didn't know me, and I started to play, and he just said, but that's what I heard all along. And we never needed, we've said a lot of things since then, but in a funny way, that was probably the most important statement we made to each other. I, in the language of music, and he in just going, yeah, that's what I imagine. I like them to hear the music, but I would like them to not be that aware of it. I would like them to be aware of the complete experience. Because the first time Denis showed me the film, actually, I kept having this experience where something new and original was happening, and I'm going, oh, that's pretty great. And then 2 minutes later, something new and original was happening, and he kept upping the ante. To Denis and me, somehow, this book, you know, and we're not talking about Kafka, Goethe, Shakespeare, Chaucer, James Joyce. We're not talking about, you know, the canon of great world literature. We're talking about something completely different. We're talking about something that got under our skin when we were teenagers, and when we were working on it, it took us back to that time, and it took us back to the purity of that time. And I think, look, we live in an we live in an interesting world, which is turning. You've been outside today? It's turning more and more into the desert planet. So, but that's sort of even that is vaguely beside the point. It just it gripped us and never let us go.
I was really excited to come back on part two because part one had been such an exciting experience. But I thought that I was ready for it because I'd done the first film, but it was nothing like the first one. It was just as memorable, but it was such a bigger movie. And we only realized it as we were making it that the scale, the scope was so much bigger. So I would say that I was excited to come back and ready for what was coming, and it ended up being more exciting than I had expected. Javier Bardem is incredible in this film. He is the father, the uncle, the friend that everyone wants. He plays a father figure to Paul, and he's a religious believer in the Lisan al-Gaib, which is, the one who will lead them to paradise. But he also has a very, he's also very funny. I think Stilgar is going to surprise people, and I think people are going to fall in love with this character more than ever. Bautista is one of the most generous actors. He will do anything Denis throws at him in a script. We had him hanging midair out of an ornithopter. He was running through war-filled fields, desert fields. He really his character gets humiliated. Dave Bautista really just went all in. Having Stellan come back, he was experiencing the full prosthetics transformation, but with the experience of the first film, they were able to shave off a few hours of prep time. So instead of 6 to 7 hours in the chair in the morning, he was maybe spending 4 to 5. The character that Charlotte Rampling plays is the Reverend Mother Mohayim, and more than ever, even though she's in the shadows, she truly is the one who is pulling the strings of power. Hans Zimmer is always pushing the boundaries of music in general. He, for the first film, wanted to create new instruments, to create the sound of what music would sound like in 10,191. And on this one, he wanted to push that even further. And therefore, he developed and created new instruments, or used some pre-existing instruments, but transformed the sounds to make the compositions and pieces just sound otherworldly. And he accomplished that 100%. We're more immersed in Gedi Prime, this very dark planet. We feel that in the music. He really embraced the DNA of the music from the first film, but expanded it and created new textures that are surprising, but also familiar. It's very artfully done, obviously. I hope audiences enjoy the ride. This film was designed with having an experience in the theater, to feel the adrenaline of going on a sand ride, of fighting the Harkonnen, of fighting the Sardaukar. And we worked really hard on this film, and it was very satisfying work, but we felt the adrenaline when we were on set. And I hope that people sitting in the theater will experience that same feeling.
It's been an incredible journey. I feel like it never quite ended. It just felt continuous from the first film into our journey through the Oscars and then straight into prep. Timothee is hands down one of the best actors of his generation, and he really completely inhabits the character now, who has been had this leadership role thrust upon him, and he becomes everything that he has the potential of in the first film. We see him wrestling with what destiny his mother and the Bene Gesserit have for him. And Timothee does a beautiful job of, I think, humanizing all of that intensity and complexity. And you really feel him wrestling with it in a way that I think is very relatable. Although certainly none of us necessarily have those powers or abilities, I think we can all relate to trying to be the best version of ourselves, and again, who we want to be versus what the world wants us to be. Zendaya is such a multifaceted, talented actress. She's arguably one of the best of her generation. She brings a vulnerability as well as a strength. Chani is a warrior unlike anyone else. You see her on the front lines. She is, at the same time, very much the heart and soul for Paul, and puts Paul through his paces in terms of really earning her love. Rebecca's brought an incredible intensity to Lady Jessica. This is the culmination of everything that Lady Jessica has been raised to do as a Bene Gesserit. This is the ultimate for her. This is the ultimate mission. She believes deeply that Paul is the Kwisatz Haderach, and she will stop at nothing to make sure that he fulfills that destiny. Fade is the nephew of the Baron, played by I will say it again, one of the very best actors of his generation, Austin Butler. The character is psychotic. He truly takes pleasure in killing. He is a master swordsman. We see him for the first time in the gladiator pit, and for him, the ultimate power is to get Arrakis, and he is given this gift by his uncle, who also believes that perhaps he's the only person who can ultimately bring victory and control. Léa Seydoux, an incredible actress, it plays Lady Finring. She's a Bene Gesserit who has a very specific mission, and is probably one of the only Bene Gesserit who could actually come in and figure out how to control and bring Fade into what becomes the ultimate power play for the Bene Gesserit. Because as we know, they don't really pick sides. It's all about the bigger chess game. And so for them, Fade Rotha becomes the one who they believe can carry through what is their ultimate agenda. One of my favorite moments in the film is when Gurney and Paul are reunited. It's a surprise, it's unexpected, it's incredibly emotional. We left it was unknown what happened to Gurney in the first film. And for Paul, the loss that he believed, between losing his father, Duncan, Idaho, Gurney, he believes is dead. And so this moment that they find each other, which again feels like destiny, is a huge turning point in the film. And right at the moment that Paul is wrestling with what he's going to do with his power. Josh he's incredible. It's hard to imagine this film without him, and just his energy and his commitment, and he brings a lot of humor to the film. And Gurney is such a true and loyal character that it's impossible not to root for him. It's hard to imagine anybody else directing this movie. This film works, or needs to work, on so many different levels, both on an intimate character level as well as on a giant, epic, made for the big screen. We shot the entire film in IMAX. And I think there's very few filmmakers who are able to work on both levels as effortlessly as Denis is able to. And he's a master world builder. And he has a way of making a world that is very foreign feel incredibly relatable and very real. So much of that is done in camera, which is very important to Denis, and the level of detail, whether it's the costumes, the set design, all of those details coming together to form something that feels organic and real. So the film does not feel off-putting in any way. Denis done a beautiful job of, in some ways, melding genres. And what I mean by that is the film is very much a gritty war film, while at the same time an epic adventure film, while at the same time an intense Shakespearean power play film, a love story, The emotionality and the intensity of the film is incredible, and he blends it so beautifully together. You know, it's hard enough to do one well, but he's told them in always from the perspective of character first, but they're beautifully intertwined. There's only one Hans Zimmer, deservedly so. Hans, I believe, this is setting the bar high, has outdone himself. He has created new instruments, new sounds, yet at the same time, everything feels as if it's old while being new. The love theme, the first time I heard it, it's never left me. His music penetrates your soul in ways that is hard to describe. And I think that Hans understands, he's a big Dune fan, but he deeply understands how intimate the film is on one level and how epic it is on another level. And I think he's done an incredible job reflecting that in the music.